was supposed to be happening couldn't happen without fraud. His big clients were the Goodfellas guys. We're maybe 6 months ahead of the FBI coming and doing a raid. So if you think you're going to lose your law license, what do? And it's like this revelation comes over me, like that all these years where I thought people were doing things to hurt me or the world was against me, I was really the one who was doing the bad things. My parents were middle-class Jewish refugees from the city, and we moved out to Long Island, basically in the Great Exodus, where everyone made from Brooklyn and Queens and everything out to Long Island. And it was kind of like the swinging 60s. And as soon as possible, my parents completely abandoned us, because they were doing crazy stuff out there like all the other parents were doing. They were living the good life. You know, this is the first time. And we were all left to pretty much raise ourselves. It was a whole culture out there.
Like we're talking about like the 60s, like flower children kind of thing?
Well,
or...
my mother, they were actually older than that. My mother was a party girl. I mean,
okay.
like a full blown on party girl. She later became like a Manhattan party girl.
Okay.
And my father had been in a family business and it failed. And then he had to kind of go out on his own. And as soon as my mother figured out that my father wasn't going to be the great success that she had hoped for,
right.
You know, the guy who was going to lead her out of Brooklyn and lead her into the promised land, she started seeing other guys. She had affairs. She was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I think my parents were probably swingers.
Right.
That was going on in my neighborhood out there in Long Island. You know, like we would peer through the windows and like watch our parents have parties on Saturday nights, and we didn't know what was going on. Figured it out later. But it was a whole class of people, mostly Jewish kids, who we had to raise ourselves. And it was a little daunting to try to figure out like what to do, how to do it. You know, we became drinkers and druggers very early. My mother took
I'm sorry, when you say we, you mean like you and what? You have a brother?
Me,
sister?
my brother, my sister.
Okay.
But I'm talking about everybody in my junior high school and everybody in my high school. It was just this whole era of kids whose parents had basically abandoned them. And if you ask any kid from Long Island, they're going to tell you the same story.
Okay.
It was crazy. And it was the first time anybody had, you know, a little bit of money. We weren't upper class. We weren't rich, but nobody was poor.
Right.
And
they weren't going to bed hungry. You did not have any clothes, you know.
No. And so my mother was into Mother's Little Helpers, you know, so she had uppers and downers, and there was this big bar in the house that was this big wraparound bar in one of the rooms where they kept all the liquor, and, you know, it was in a locked cabinet, which of course we knew where the key was.
Well, I was going to say that the Mother's Little, like Colby doesn't know what Mother's Little Helpers are. Like literal, do you? Okay, I know you never heard of it.
So Mother's Little Helpers is basically my mother went to a diet doctor.
Right.
And the diet doctor gave her uppers to diet, you know, so amphetamines, and that would get her up. But to go to sleep at night, she would have to take these downers, Secanols, Tuanols, Placidils, and she had them in jars of like 500 a piece. I mean, it wasn't like now. And so once I started drinking, and so I'm stealing, you know, vodka or something from the bar, and I'm literally sitting on the floor of my mother's bathroom, and underneath the bottom, there's just these jars of pills. And so after school, my friends and I are sitting there like drinking, popping pills, trying to figure out
what these are doing, what
they would do. And sometimes we would get it right, like we wanted to take downers, and so we were taking downers. And sometimes we saw something that we didn't know what it was, but they were really uppers. And so I had sleepovers with my friends, where they would stay over the house, and we took uppers but didn't know it. And then we'd like have to push my mother's car out into the street because we wouldn't start it in the garage. And then we just did joyrides all over Long Island, you know, completely stoned out of our minds. And that was my childhood.
Right.
That was my childhood. That was what it was. We were one exit away from Jones Beach. and we would go to the beach almost every day, either by skiff, because it was right across the bay. And it was no character building whatsoever. None.
Well, I was gonna say, it does not seem like Long Island. Like it's not the picture I have of Long Island, but.
Well, imagine Steven Spielberg from E.T.,
right.
That neighborhood in E.T., but like the kids are on mescaline. That would basically be.
I was thinking I was thinking middle class and tranquil. You know what I'm saying? Like there's
no.
But then I was raised in the South, no idea.
This is what growing up in Long Island was like, and just having the first inkling or the first money that anybody ever really had, but not enough money that we could actually go to private schools and things like that.
Did you ever get into trouble or anything? Like the cops ever pull over the cars? Did you ever get in trouble in school? Anything like that?
I was always in trouble. I was one of those kids who was like a smart kid in all the AP classes, but I hung out with my friends in the parking lot.
Right.
And it was hard to navigate those two things because, the kids in the AP classes were the kids who were in my classes when I was like in elementary school and junior high school. We all knew each other from the neighborhood, but I was hanging out in the parking lot. And the crazy thing is that the smart kids wanted to hang out with the kids in the parking lot, not the other way around.
Right.
And so I was kind of like their key to be able to go hang out in the parking lot with the cool kids.
So are you always getting good grades?
I got good grades until the kind of like the lifestyle and the drugs kind of like prevented me from doing a lot of things. And also there was so much disharmony at home. My parents were splitting up and my brother and sister were having their own problems. And I could really not, can I curse on this podcast? Well, I really just couldn't keep my shit together.
Right. Well, I was going to say, because, sometimes what happens is like kids they're getting in trouble, but they're getting straight A's. And so your parents, it's like, he's doing this, but God, he's smart and he's getting good grades. And it's like, so it becomes kind of like a problem for your parents because they're like, he's getting good grades. He's doing everything right. He did get in trouble for this or for that, but it becomes its own kind of a quagmire for your parents to be in the situation where they're like, fuck it.
Well, I was the easy kid of all the three siblings, but I was not getting good grades because I was drinking and drugging mostly and hanging out with this crowd, but I was getting very high test scores, high SAT scores, all of that stuff, which eventually is kind of what led me to college and then led me to law school because I tested really well. But I was kind of a late bloomer, in college, I kind of figured out that I needed good grades, at least good enough to get me into law school. Right.
Well, why did you figure on law school? Why did you go to law school?
I don't know. It was like I never really saw another path. I always assumed I was going to become a lawyer. I loved it. I was kind of the problem solver in my crowd. I was the problem solver in my house. I just always saw myself as a lawyer. And I just wasn't adventurous enough to like go out and do something, like take time off and go travel Europe in a backpack or something,
right?
With a backpack on. I just was not that kind of person. And so
I feel like those are always kids of means, though, for some reason. I always feel like, and I could be wrong, but I always feel like those are kids that have something to fall back on. Like, like you can be a little bit more adventurous if when things go wrong. I can always go back to my spare bedroom, or I can always go to my parents for help. That sort of thing.
Well, that's certainly the people that I met once I moved to Connecticut and moved to Greenwich later on in my life. I found people whose childhoods were like that, but mine was, we were probably one of the poorest families in our neighborhood, but we weren't poor. But these were all families that were like really moving up the line in terms of, acquiring wealth and becoming successful. And my family was just in tatters. And before I moved to college, my father's business had failed. And so I couldn't go to a private school. I had to go to a public school. And I was like way overqualified for this school I went to. And everybody knew it. I knew it. The teachers knew it. The professors knew it. And so it was like a playground for me. I wound up kind of taking over the student government and taking over the school newspaper. And it wound up being this this kind of exercise at how much I can get away with. And I didn't really know that it was like a precursor for stuff later on that was going to wind up becoming criminal behavior. You know, I had no respect and I had complete contempt for authority. I did what I wanted, and I was allowed to get away with whatever I could get away with until somebody tried to stop me. And then when they did, I negotiated my way out of it.
I was just thinking that, boy, that sounds familiar. Where it's like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And if I get caught, I'll talk my way out of it. And that works until you can't talk your way out of it. And it hits, and bam, you find yourself in prison.
It took a lot of years to get there.
Right.
I mean, an example is that we were basically running the student government. We were running the student budget. And I had a column in the school newspaper. So this is in college. I have a column in the school newspaper. So of course, somewhere in my brain, what I'm thinking is I can use this column to interview professors and it would introduce professors to the rest of the college, which on its face seems like a very nice thing to do. But of course, I'm bartering with the professors for grades. I mean, basically, I'll give you a good column,
right,
if I'm going to get a good grade, but I'll tank you if you're going to get a bad grade. And so I'm doing this, and it becomes, I guess, kind of obvious to the administration what I'm doing, because I'm basically running roughshod over everything. And the president of the school brought me up to his office in the tower. And he just looked at me and he said to me, "Look, what are you doing here? I mean, these are like phys ed majors and these are fine arts majors. Like, what are you doing here?" And I told him a little story about how my father lost his business and all. And he said, "Listen, we just can't have you do this anymore. Like, you got to chill." And he says, "How do we get you to stop?" And I said, "Write write a recommendation for me to get into law school and I'll retire."
Right.
and he said, "Done." And I gave up the column the next week, and he gave me a glowing recommendation. And a few months later, I got into law school.
What law school?
Well, I wound up going to New York Law School. I got it, but I had to follow the money. We had no money.
Right.
And I went to New York Law School in Manhattan, and I was working, selling shoes, putting myself through school. And by the time I became a senior in my third year of law school, I was selling shoes at Paul Stewart, which is one of the nicest men's stores on Madison Avenue. And I was in the shoe department, and I was meeting people who were like I remember I was waiting on these two gentlemen, and they were dressed beautifully. I mean, the suits then and the shoes then were expensive. Now they're super expensive. And they're sitting next to each other, and they're kind of fooling around, and I'm helping them with their shoes, and I said to one of them, "Let me, can I wrap this up?" And he said, "Sure." And he handed me his credit card, and his credit card said, "President of Pepsi Cola," on the credit card.
All right.
And I'm saying, "Are you the president of Pepsi Cola?" And he looks at the guy next to him, and he was like this. He goes, "That's nothing. This is the chairman of the board."
Right.
And so these are the people who I'm selling shoes to, and I realized that I think I can sell.
Right.
So when I graduated law school, I never got a job that would pay me even more than I was making at the shoe store, at the shoe department. I was making a lot of money in the shoe department, selling at that time $600-700 pair of shoes. So I decided to hang out my shingle. I said, "Look, if I can sell shoes, I can sell law."
Right.
But I had no idea what I was doing.
Well, I always feel bad. I was going to say the jailhouse lawyers.
Yeah.
Like there are some of the guys that are amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
And then there, and I always think to myself, like, how many people's cases did you butcher until you got it right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's that first 60 or 80 guys that, boy, those were horrible arguments. None of that worked. You didn't get the good. Now you've been doing this for 5 years. It's like now they have the arguments down. They can write a motion. But boy, those first few clients, it's not great.
Yeah. When I first got out of law school, my first job I wasn't a lawyer yet, because it takes about a year after you get out of law school to become a lawyer. You got to take the bar exam and all that kind of stuff. So I'm law clerking with this criminal defense attorney. His big clients were all the Goodfellas guys, the real Goodfellas guys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So Henry Hill, was played by Ray Liotta.
Right.
Henry was his client. But Henry was, at that point, in the government witness protection program. And this was like pre-RICO. So they didn't take away your money. So Henry's got all this.
I like that.
Right, not bad, right? So Henry's got all this money, but he's in the government witness protection program, and nobody knows where he is. Now maybe Bob did, because my boss was named Bob Simmels. And maybe he did. Oh, by the way, the sidebar is that much later on, Bob served about 10 years.
Okay.
For obstructive justice, witness tampering, and so he's in our support group now.
Right.
Yeah, he is. He's a good friend of mine. So every morning I would come in to the office, and I would get a call from Henry Hill, and hey Jeff, how you doing? And I was like his. I moved his money around. I did his trades on Wall Street. I called the banks. He couldn't. He was in witness protection program.
Right.
So for the 6 months I was there, I was Henry Hill's like gopher. It was crazy. I did finally get to meet him though.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I have a buddy, Wade, who's really into all the mob genre, the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And we had both read the book. Or did I read it and he listened to it, I think. What, Wise Guys.
Wise Guys,
right?
yeah. That was the name of the book.
And then there was a second book that I think Henry Hill wrote about him being in witness protection. And it's insanity. Oh, yeah. Like, crazy. He's behaving like he's insane, and he's getting pulled over by the cop. And no matter what trouble he got in, the FBI would come in and say, oh, no. Or the marshals, U.S. Marshals, and the FBI would be like, no, you can't charge him with this. No, you have to drop that. Nope, get him out of jail. No, he's okay with that. Like, because they were still, people don't realize, they think, if you watch the movie, you think, well, he testified in, one trial. Yeah. No, he testified in like 40 trials. This went on for, 5, 6, 7 years. He's on witness protection while he's putting away tons of guys, and they're using him constantly. So, but yeah, it was amazing how he behaved on witness protection. What a problem he had being on witness protection, because he'd been a maniac his entire life and gotten away with it. Now you got to have the marshals try and run interference for you.
And my personality was kind of perfect for this, because I was, I had been out of control, and my drug and alcohol use had diminished at that point, but not completely. And this wacky stuff is going on, and I'm drawn to the craziness.
Right.
So
these are my people.
That probably remains true today. So
you hung out a shingle.
I hung out a shingle, and I was renting a desk from someone, and that was for about 3 months. And then all of a sudden, a lot of business started coming in, but I did not know how to handle it. Because when you're a young lawyer who's just starting out, just like one of these jailhouse lawyers that you talked about, you don't know how to practice law, Yeah. So I had enough work coming in that I had to go hire lawyers who were my senior, like 5 years older than me.
Right.
But I was the rainmaker. I was bringing in the business. And ultimately, that was my first firm that started. And I was just learning at this rate of just soaking up stuff, of learning a craft. But what didn't happen was that I wasn't in like a large firm or middle-sized firm environment where you learn the kind of nuts and bolts of all the character building and the ethics and everything else you need to be a lawyer. I was like, it was like cowboys and Indian stuff. I was winging it.
Right.
And it was just like when I was growing up. It's like I never grew up. I became just someone who did whatever I was still someone who did whatever I wanted to do. And I never, other than like a few classes in law school, I really never understood the rules. I mean, I didn't even have a good sense of right and wrong. I didn't. And so I just played it fast and loose pretty much as long as I could. At some point, while my offices were still in Manhattan, the drugs and the alcohol were catching up with me. I was like decompensating, and I had a kind of come to Jesus moment around 1986 or so. And then I didn't get sober, but I did go into therapy, and that helped a lot. I mean, at first I was like in a lot of therapy, and everything kind of just tamped down, where ultimately I had gotten married and we had 2 children, and I decided that I wanted to be around for my children, unlike the way my father hadn't been for me. And I woke up literally on January 1st of 1991, and looked at my ex-wife, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I said, I'm shutting the office down in Manhattan. And we were living in Rye in Westchester County at the time, just north of New York. And I said to her, I'm shutting down the office and I'm moving it up here. And I'm gonna make a go of it up here, because I want to be around the kids. I want to be a dad. And
why is that a big? I don't know the layout. I mean, understand Manhattan is obviously it's whatever, upper middle class or more rich area. What is Rye?
Rye is
that the suburbs or
Rye is the suburbs. Rye is the last town before you get to Connecticut. So Greenwich and Rye are right next to each other. So they're 2 of the wealthiest towns in the country.
Okay.
And we moved to Rye, and I probably bought too much house, and I was becoming overextended and doing what crazy 30-year-olds do, and driving cars that were too expensive, and I was getting on the treadmill.
Right.
But I opened this office up in Mamaroneck, which was the next town, and I had no idea if any of my clients were going to come with me. I had no idea what I was going to find. I just knew that the New York life, Manhattan life, was burning me out. And I wanted to be a good dad and hopefully a good husband. But I didn't really have I didn't have like the willpower or to like just kind of stay sober.
Right.
I wasn't in a program at that point. Things were moving along. I started getting some of the largest clients in the county, real estate clients, and I'm not quite sure why it was attraction, but I was bringing them in.
And I mean, were you just doing any type of law, or was it strictly like you just said real estate? Is it corporate real estate? Is it criminal, or is it just your whatever's going to pay the bills?
At the time, it was almost anything that walked in the door.
Right.
But what happened was, in the same year that I moved the law firm up to Westchester County, I also opened a restaurant with a partner. And
because you don't have enough to do.
Yeah, because
it sounds like you're busy.
Oh yeah, because I'm a
maniac.
I'm a maniac.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But I have a plan, and the plan is because it's this little restaurant that's right in the right area, like right on Route 1. Route 1 goes all the way up from Florida, all the way up to Maine, right? But Route 1 is right there. And there's this little bistro that's for sale. And so I said to my partner, who's a chef, who was a Moroccan guy, but French trained. And I said, listen, if we open up this restaurant, basically this can be your breakout. But I want to set it up right so that it's attracting the wealthy people in the neighborhood and in the area. And I'm going to use it as a marketing device to sell me and my law firm.
Right.
So it didn't really make a difference if it made money or not. The idea was for it to
attract business.
So that's what happened. But I would go up to the restaurant. I had a manager in the restaurant, and then she knew everybody who would come in, or she knew most of the people who would come in. And she would call me up. So I would go home from the office and I would have dinner with my kids. And then she would call me up and she would say to me, so-and-so's in the restaurant tonight. Do you want to come up? And I said, yeah. So I was only like 5 minutes from the restaurant where my house was. So I would walk in the door, and she was like this 4'11" little bundle of energy, Irish bundle of energy. And she would come up to me and she would put her face like right to my chest, right here. Right. And she would look up at me and she would say, so-and-so's at table 1, so-and-so's at table 4, so-and-so, and right, she would give me the names.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, everybody wants to talk to the owner. You know, I would walk around, how you doing, backslap, everything else. And this one particular night, she said, so-and-so's at this table, and he's sitting there all alone, and he's drinking. And I think something may have happened. So I go over to him, and I put my hand on his shoulder, how you doing? And we knew each other casually. You know, he'd been in the restaurant before. He was a neighbor, but he had a big house on the water. And he asked me if I wanted to sit down and have a drink with him. And I said, sure. And one thing led to another, and we talked for 3 hours. And at the end of those 3 hours, he looked at me and he said to me, he had told me that his ex-general counsel for his company, and he was a real estate guy who had tens of thousands of units of residential real estate, very wealthy guy. And he said that his old general counsel had just been arrested and taken away in handcuffs. Now, this is like here.
Hopefully that's a him problem and not an us problem.
No, this is the foreshadowing for everything else that plays out. And so this guy who's a lunatic is sitting there in front of me. He said to me, how'd you like to be my new general counsel? And I said to him, you don't even know me.
Right.
I said, what are you talking about? And he said, no, but I get a good feeling. I said, no, you don't hire a general counsel on a good feeling.
Right.
And he said, okay, you're going to have to go through a bunch of interviews with all of my senior staff and everything. But at the end of the day, I make the decisions, and I'm telling you that I want you to be my new general counsel. So I wake up the next morning and I figure, like, the guy was drunk.
Right.
Right? Like, whatever, you know, I'm just go to work. But I get a phone call from someone in his office who said, you know, do you want to come in, do the series of interviews? And 3 weeks later, I'm his general counsel.
Okay. Why was the first general counsel arrested?
Oh, well, this is
because we need to know, like, are you jumping into the fire?
Oh, no. Well, there was definitely a fire.
Okay.
There was definitely a fire. But the client, the guy who had now hired me, he didn't appreciate how big the fire was going to be. Because what happened about a year later was that there was a full FBI raid and 100 agents, and they took away every one of their files. I mean, imagine taking 20,000 tenant files, but I was there ahead of that, and I hadn't been there for the problems. I was now a problem solver.
Right. Yeah. So you're not roped into this.
No, I'm not.
I'm the one putting out the fire. What was the fire, though? What was he doing?
He wasn't doing anything.
Yes. Okay.
It was the people who worked for him that were doing things, and they were robbing him blind.
Okay.
But the way they were robbing him blind is that this is like a third generation Jewish real estate family, and which I wound up representing a lot of. And maybe it's just my disposition to be able to deal with this type of people. They're very wealthy, and they're very privileged, and they're very entitled. So what I said to the client is, I'm not going to give you his name. So what I said to him was, listen, because I had spent a bunch of years doing real estate, you know, in the city. And I said, just like, I'm going to come in the middle of the night and start reading your files. And I might be able to tell from reading your files, like what the pattern is, like what's been going on. And I caught some patterns. I did. I said, like what was supposed to be happening couldn't happen without fraud. It couldn't happen. I'm not going to get into the particulars of it. So I go to the boss. I go to the guy who hired me, and I say to him, listen, I'm going to tell you what I found, but before I tell you what I found, I need to know, are you in on it? Right? I need to know, are you, right? And he said to me, I didn't do anything wrong. And I said, well, I think everybody says that.
Yeah.
So tell me how you didn't do anything wrong. Explain to me in advance, before I tell you, how is it that you didn't do anything wrong? And he looked right at me. And he said, because for the last 2 years, which is when this was all happening, he said, for the last 2 years, I've been out on my yacht blown with hookers.
Yeah, you don't admit that unless it's true. You don't. That's not an excuse you use unless that's what's happening.
And I said, this guy's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
yeah.
I mean,
That's like saying I couldn't have robbed the bank, here. Why? Because I was burglarizing a house over here. Like,
and as it turns out, that was true.
Right.
Because there was so much money, and he had a bad drug habit. So I told him what was going on, and of course he was ashen. He didn't really know what to do. And I said, listen, if what I suspect is true, we're maybe 6 months ahead of the FBI coming and doing a raid. So what I need you to do is I need you to approve that we're gonna set up separate space, a war room. I'm gonna hire people, and we're gonna. At that time, it was like you still had like Xerox things. Mm-hmm. We're going to make copies of your most important records. We're going to keep them in my office so that they're privileged, in this war room, and we're going to profile every case, and we're going to be ahead of things when they come and they raid you and they do their seizure. And he looked at me like, "You must be crazy." And I said, "No, I'm serious. This really could happen." And I gave him a budget, and he said, "Let's do it." And that's what we did.
Right.
And for 6 months, we did it. And then lo and behold, on the snowy winter morning of 1992, the 2 tractor trailers pull up, and it was like the cavalry had come in. I can't even tell you. And it's not like when you hear from someone's story that the FBI kicked my door down.
Right.
This was a building.
Right.
Right. And so there were hundreds of team members and computer team members and there were members who just sat with me and my team in the conference room negotiating attorney-client privilege documents. And this thing went on. And at the end of the day, they took all the files. And the next morning, and I cannot remember whether or not the client was arrested that day, but his whole family was indicted, and most of the senior staff were indicted, and it was this big mess, this huge mess. And we wound up hiring between 15 and 20 of the most well-known criminal defense attorneys in Manhattan, because it was a Southern District of New York case. So we wind up hiring all these different law firms because each person who had been indicted needed a separate law firm.
Right.
And the companies needed separate law firms. So now I'm in the middle of all of this thing, and I'm the general counsel, and I'm the paymaster. And back then, the legal bill wound up being somewhere around $25 million. So now it would be, I don't know, close to $100 million worth of legal fees. And I learned everything from the best. I learned all about how to run these cases, how to manage these cases, and I was this became my full-time job.
Right.
Even though I still had a firm and I still had other cases and other clients, this was basically what I was doing for 5 years. And when it finally resolved itself, and the client did great, by the way. He wound up doing great. He did a little bit of time, but in the interim, he was just making more and more money. I said, this is like what I want to do. This is my sweet spot. This is like, me being crazy and me having this special, and everything was together. I didn't know how to make a business out of it. But at that point, my drug use had increased.
So I'm sorry. So when you're saying this is what I want to do, you want to manage a massive amount of lawyers, or you want to go into a chaotic situation and be
I want to be the specialty guy that you bring in when you have a crisis.
Okay.
And I'm the lawyer who puts together all the lawyers. I'm the lawyer who oversees everything. I'm making sure everything's run right. I'm crisis management, but as a lawyer, and they're submitting their bills to me, and I'm negotiating the bills, and the go-to person in a crisis.
Yeah, when MCI goes down or Enron or something, you're the guy that comes when they're all scurrying. You're the guy that can come in and say.
I at that point I felt adequate to do it for non-public companies. Okay. I don't know that I could have done it for a public company, but for wealthy individuals who have either their own situations or have their own companies, I felt comfortable doing it. But what had happened is I had gotten injured in a sports injury. And after the sports injury, I became addicted to prescription opioids. And that was playing itself out. And I was doing a lot of opioids even through the end of this representation. And so there I am now at the end of the 90s, and I'm deep into my drug habit. And then OxyContin comes out, and then it just went into overdrive. This client was gone now, and I just stopped paying attention altogether. And I wasn't showing up at work, and I was just doing these prescription. I had no way of knowing really that was the beginning of the opioid crisis.
Right.
You know, I don't consider myself a victim, but I was one of the early people who got hooked on oxys.
Right. Well, you already had a pre-existing addiction,
Exactly.
So oxys didn't help.
No. In fact, it was like jet fuel. So then what happened was the day came when we couldn't make payroll. And mostly because I wasn't paying attention. and my office manager said to me, we can't make payroll. And what do you want to do? And I said, well, let's just borrow some money from the client escrow account because we probably had a few $1 million in there.
It's a bad idea.
It was a very bad idea.
Was it commingling funds or what?
Yeah. Theft is probably
more accurate.
Yeah. And she looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah.
And I said, well, we'll just take a little bit and we'll put it back. And
I can't be here for this. Like 20 years ago, I'd been like, yeah, that makes sense. I would have blown it off. But now if somebody said that to me, I'd be like, oh, I can't be here. I'd have to leave right now.
And it was just as simple as on her computer screen, just 2 buttons.
Yeah.
Just move it from this account to this account. And I'm telling you, there's so many other things I could have done. I could have called my bank. I had cash sitting around.
Yeah.
I had friends I could have called up and I could have said, listen, I need a check for $50K, right? Whatever it was. No, not me. I'm so deep in it. So we do that. And it winds up, I wind up doing it a few more times. I wind up using it kind of as a wallet. Not long after that, there's a grievance that's brought against me. And when the grievance was brought against me, one of the things that happens is that they want to see 6 months of the escrow records. And it had nothing to do with that.
Right.
But there's a grievance, we resolved it in a day. And they said, but as a matter of course, we want to see 6 months of escrow records. That's just that's our process. And then in that moment, it was like I knew I was dead. There was like no way I was going to survive that. But I went out and I hired ethics counsel and lied to ethics counsel, lied to everybody. I was still doing the drugs. And we fought it for a couple of years. And we were doing a pretty good job fighting it for 2 years.
Giving them the 6 months?
No, fighting the ethics complaint that was against me now. Because now they're like, now they think what I've done is I've stolen client money. And actually there was no money lost. It was just that you could see all the ins and outs.
Yeah, so you're just borrowing from it, but you're putting the money back.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that. I thought you were just taking it.
No. So
Okay.
I'm putting it back, but you lose your law license for that too.
Yeah.
So while we're in the middle of that, and I'm like getting more and more paranoid, and what do you do? It's like, do you even bring in? So if you think you're going to lose your law license, what do? You bring in more clients? What do you do? I mean, how can you honestly represent someone if you tell them, well, listen, I might not be around here 6 months from now? But I kept bringing in clients, but everything was dwindling down. And then 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, it was like, it just sucked my legs out from under me. Like everything I'd been going on had been too much for me anyway. And now I'm in complete despair. I decide I'm going to dismantle my law firm. Like there's no way I'm going to survive all this.
Well, why 9/11? What specifically about 9/11?
I don't know. I think it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. You know what I mean? It was just like, oh my God, like the world's coming to an end.
Okay.
But a month or two later, they're advertising these SBA loans, which are EIDL loans, which now from
what does that mean?
Well, from the pandemic and all these COVID loans, these were the COVID loans, kind of COVID loans, the PPP loans and things like that were 20 years ago after 9/11. So they were giving out these emergency loans, the EIDL loans, and they were like 30-year loans at 3%.
Right.
And
for businesses that were failing as a result of the economy.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And because I was one county away from New York City, I was in the bubble of counties where I could get EIDL money. But I called them up and they said, yeah, you'll probably qualify, fill out an application. And it wasn't like it is now where they like email you stuff, like there was actually, I had to go pick it up and I had to fill it out. And right. So when I'm filling out the application, I'm so desperate and I'm so stoned and so scared that I lied on the application and said that I have an office a block away from Ground Zero at 40 Wall Street.
Okay.
Because I want to be like right in the zone and right in the zone. And it wasn't exactly untrue because I did have conference facilities there, but I never used them and I didn't have any economic loss as a result of losing them. But I know what I'm doing is I'm padding my application so that and they already told me I'm approved.
Right.
So I'm out of my mind, right? So there's like no reason to do this whatsoever, but I do it. So they wound up lending me $247,000, which I promptly used half of roughly to pay off the credit cards I had been propping things up with, because I'm thinking like, why am I paying 24% with the credit cards?
I get 3%.
When I have a 3% loan, of course, that violates all the covenants of the SBA loans because you can only use it for operating.
Right.
And I am now not only guilty of wire fraud, but I'm guilty of money laundering, because money laundering is when I took the money and gave it to myself.
Right.
I don't know it at the time. So a few months after that, I find out that my grievance case was going really badly. And this one piece of news came in, basically that a former business partner of mine, who I'd mistreated, that wasn't surprising. I wasn't treating anyone particularly well at that point for a couple of years. And what he did was he turned like state's evidence against me. He wrote this 10 or 20 page letter to the grievance committee telling them everything I had ever done wrong. And he was a buddy of mine. He knew what I was doing wrong.
All right. This is getting worse and worse.
Oh, right. It's terrible. So the letter comes in and my lawyer sends it to me and I read it and I said to my ethics lawyer, I said, so are we done? Is this it? And he said, yeah, we're pretty much done. And I said, all right, listen, why don't you call him up and tell him I resign my law license and that'll be that. And he goes, all right, I'll do that for you. So I went to one of the doctors that was prescribing me the opioids, and I got one last prescription from him and went home that night and waited till my wife and kids went to sleep. And once they did, I took the entire vial and tried to kill myself. And so it was about 40 pills probably. And woke up somewhere in early morning in a pool of vomit all over.
Yeah, I was going to say I've spoken with people. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
But as soon as you said that, I thought, oh, that's a bad idea, because almost all the time you'll fall asleep and then your body will reject it and you start vomiting, and then you wake up. You think you're yourself, but your body will just reject. Not always, but it will.
But all I know is that. For me, I know it was a legitimate attempt to kill myself. Whether it worked or not, it was another issue.
Oh, listen, sometimes it does work. Yeah. That's the thing is that, so if you're lucky, you throw it up. If you're not lucky, it does exactly what you think it's going to do.
And the thing about it is that, look, when I've obviously spent like more than 20 years kind of thinking about it. And it was like, if you take a few, it lowers your barriers of inhibition. So like, taking one or two of them got me stoned, and then the other 38 went down pretty easy. And I think that's what happened. So my life's over. My career's over. I know I'm going to lose my house. My ex-wife does not understand what's going on. And I go through detox, and about a week later or so, in there somewhere, I wind up at Silver Hill Hospital, which is a rehab in New Canaan, Connecticut, which, by the way, is the same rehab that this client had gone to. That's how I know about it.
Right.
Right. Because I'm shuttling him back and forth to this rehab during that whole time. And so for me, it was Silver Hill or nothing. And I spent 7 weeks at Silver Hill. And so that's kind of like the first part of the story. That's like the drinking and the drugging and the misbehavior and the criminality and that's now like, I don't even understand what the consequences are going to be.
Right.
I just know that life is over.
Can I ask you a question? Going to the rehab, were you, like, after a week or two, were you acceptant of being there, or did you, after a few weeks, decide, I shouldn't be here, I can do this on my own? Or were you like, no, fully on board, I'm all in, I need this?
I was on board from the beginning, but
Okay.
I didn't really know exactly how crazy I was.
Right.
I didn't know that what I really had was bipolar disorder.
Okay.
And that had been fueling all of this stuff probably since I was a young adult or even a kid.
Right, so you're kind of self-medicating this entire time
Yeah.
to feel normal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And so
Your normality,
so there I am, like, first they have me like in the acute care unit where, it's a lockdown unit and bouncing off the walls and things. And then they move me over to the main facility. And maybe it's the first or second night I'm in the main facility, and I'm not on any illicit drugs anymore. I'm not on opioids. But they do have me on psych meds. And at the time, I'm guessing it was lithium, but it was something. And I bolt upright like in the middle of the night, and I have this revelation because I'm in a bedroom there, but these bedrooms are proof. And they had me on 15-minute checks, which means every 15 minutes they got to check on me. I don't know if you've ever seen a proofed room, but like there's no hard edges,
Right?
breakaway hangers, everything. And I bolt up in the middle of the night, and it's like this revelation comes over me, like that all these years where I thought people were doing things to hurt me, or the world was against me, I was really the one who was doing the bad things. I was the one who was hurting them. And I'm like it's like not computing. I'm like what? And I start crying. And I realized my brain is just not functioning right. And I'm crying, and I run down the hall. This is in the middle of the night. And I run to the nurse's station. I'm crying, and I say to this nurse, I said, I was the one who was hurting everybody. They weren't hurting me. I'm like babbling, and she puts her arm around me, and she said, I know, dear, I know. And she takes me into this little conference room that's behind the nurse's station. It's kind of glass wall, so you can see in there. And she sits me down, and she takes out this this loose leaf book. She takes me down, she opens it up, and what it says is, the name of the page is bipolar disorder, and it lists like all of the things that someone with bipolar disorder has: flights of ideas, grandiosity. It just lists them all. And as I'm looking at them, I'm going, that's me. And they're giving me these meds, and it's like, oh my God. It's like, so yeah, it's like at this point, I'm like, now I'm like all in. It's like, yeah, like there's something wrong. So over those 7 weeks, like friends would come visit me, and I sat, and I remember once I'm sitting on the corner of the bed, and our two best friends came to visit me. And I'm trying to explain this to them, what I'm explaining to you now. And I said, look, I must have been crazy. I must have been, you must have seen I was doing drugs. You must have seen I was crazy. Why didn't you ever say anything? And they looked right at me and they said to me, we must have told you 100 times. Mm-hmm. And I never remembered once. There was just complete denial.
Right.
That was the first time I saw my daughters since this whole thing happened. And we're sitting on the front steps of the rehab, and they look at me, and at that point they're like 18 and 14, and they look at me and they said, Dad, we don't even know who you are. And it was the first time I said to them, I said, I don't know who I am either. And it was like just such a revelation, because I don't know if I was playing a role. I don't know if I was trying to run to something, run from something, but I just knew that there was going to be a lot of pain, that their lives were going to get ripped out from under them right there. I mean, whatever we had or wherever we were, this was no longer the case.
Right.
They were scared. I was scared. Their mother was pissed, as she should have been. But I got out of rehab and moved. We went home to the house that we were not going to own very much longer. And the day I got out of rehab, I went to my first AA meeting. And I did what I was told. We sat there in a circle, and when it got to me, I raised my hand and I said, I'm Jeff. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I need a temporary sponsor. And I got a sponsor that night, temporary sponsor. And that started me in AA. And just last week, I celebrated 22 years of sobriety.
Okay.
So, I took to it, and I go every day. Moving forward with the story is I spent all my time in AA. I wasn't working anymore. I didn't know how I was going to support my family. I had a few dollars in the bank, which was good. About 20 months after I got sober, I got a call from two agents who said there's a warrant out for your arrest in connection with the false representations you'd made on the SBA loan. And
how did that even, you don't know?
I have some assumptions. One was that they had a third mortgage on my house. And so whatever money, when we sold the house, whatever came out of the excess that came out of the house had to go to them.
Right.
But it wasn't the payoff in full. There wasn't enough equity to pay them off in full. So as soon as that happens, anytime that happens, they started an investigation.
Right.
So I assume that what happened is that they started going through everything, and they went through the paperwork and everything, and then they realized, and then they made a referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office. I assume that's what happened.
Right.
No one ever told me, but I've been involved in
enough litigation, enough cases.
I've been involved in over 1,000 cases since then, and I can tell you that's pretty much what happened. So it's now still within this 2-year bubble post 9/11, and I have to go present myself down at 500 Pearl Street at the federal court down there. And I drive down, and it's like a war zone. I don't know if you remember what was going on in Manhattan back then, but there were checkpoints, and they were putting mirrors under your car, and there were military around, and I felt like the worst person in the world. I mean, this is like a war crime. And I met my lawyer, and we walked into 500 Pearl, and he presented me to the U.S. Marshals, and that was the first time I'd ever had handcuffs on. And they brought me downstairs to a cell that was 3 floors below the federal courthouse, where I sat for 4 or 5 hours. And then they brought me upstairs to the magistrate's courtroom, where I got arraigned and released without a bond.
Right.
And they took my passport and, all that stuff. And I thought, this was it. I didn't have a friend left in the world. My money, I didn't know if it was going to run out. I didn't know what was going to happen. My wife had already told me that we were over.
Right.
Very soon thereafter, she kicked me out. And I wound up, well, on the day she kicked me out, I went to my AA meeting in the morning. And I had been going to the AA meeting for almost 2 years at that point. And I went to the meeting. And when it was my turn to share, I raised my hand and I said, I'm Jeff, I'm an alcoholic. And I got kicked out of my house, and because they all knew I'd been arrested.
Yeah.
And I said, everything I own is in 2 valises, two duffels in the back of my car. That's my clothes. And I don't know where I'm going to go. I have no money. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight.
If you sleep hot at night, you know how disruptive that can be. Whether you're having trouble falling asleep, you're waking up sweating in the middle of the night, or all of the above, that's where GhostBed can help. As the makers of the coolest beds in the world, GhostBed is your go-to for cooling mattresses, cooling pillows, and cooling bedding. From their signature Ghost Ice fabric to patented technology that adjusts to your body's temperature, every GhostBed mattress is designed with cooling in mind. So whether you want a plusher mattress that cushions your shoulders and hips, or a firm option with exceptional support, your GhostBed will keep you cool and comfortable all night long. When you purchase a GhostBed mattress, your comfort is guaranteed. You can try out your mattress for 101 nights, risk-free, to make sure it's the right fit for you. Plus, they offer free shipping, and most items are shipped within 24 hours. If you're not sure which Ghost bed is right for you, check out their mattress quiz. You'll answer a few questions and get a personalized recommendation. Even better, our listeners can get 50% off site-wide for a limited time. Just visit ghostbed.com/Cox and use the code COX at checkout. Again, that's ghostbed.com/Cox with the code COX at the checkout to save a whopping 50% off site-wide.
And now I'm going to meetings in Greenwich because we had moved to Greenwich, an apartment in Greenwich after we sold the house. And Greenwich is like pretty high rent district, right?
Right.
So 3 guys came up to me after the meeting and said to me that you can stay with me.
Yeah.
And so for the next year and a half, until I went to prison, actually, I stayed in guest rooms and on people's sofas as basically a person without a home. My wife and kids lived in an apartment,
right?
And every penny I had went to that. But in exchange for like walking these guys' dogs and making sure their lawns got mowed and things like that, I had a place to sleep, and I had to rely.
I was gonna say humbling, super humbling, right? Like,
and in some ways, it was great.
Yeah, I that's so funny. I'm sorry. Literally, I always say that like the best I felt was like when I got out of prison and I was like living in someone's spare room, just super humbling. But I felt so good,
but also like simple.
Yeah. I was just like grateful. I just felt grateful for all the things I've taken advantage of.
And you're like, I didn't have to worry about all those things like mortgages and car payments. And it was just simple. I just got up in the morning and went to a meeting, made arrangements to see my kids at some point during the day if I could. And life was just really simple. Of course, I met a woman in AA and we fell in love, which is generally not a good idea to meet a woman in AA.
Right.
But
it had also been years.
You'd
been doing, you'd been a part of like that. Don't they say like the first year, like do not get into a relationship, but you've been doing this for years.
Oh yeah. But I was definitely, on the rebound from my marriage, and her marriage was breaking up too. And, at first we just started hanging out with each other, and then we started dating. And by the way, we're married 15 years now. So
nice.
So that's Lynn. And she was not equipped to deal with all this madness and where it looked like I was going to prison. And she's just not that type of person. And how like what a bad bet I was. Like, what is she doing with me? I mean, she's beautiful. She's a Greenwich woman. She has all these friends in town, but she was in AA. So she had a drinking problem. And we wound up, getting sober together in essence. My case was proceeding, and it took 2 more years to get sentenced, and for all kinds of legal reasons. But on Easter Sunday, April of 2006, I reported to Allenwood Low Security Prison.
Well, what did you get?
I got 18-month sentence. 18 months.
Okay.
Yeah, 18 months. I did go to downward departure.
Okay.
A downward variance. And the variance was because of all the good work I had done in AA.
Oh, okay.
So
nice.
Yeah, it was nice, right?
It doesn't typically, that's not the typical thing unless they really believe it, because a lot of people go for a variance and they just don't get it. You have to have something that's pretty significant to get one.
Well, I was probably looking at like 21 months, so I got a 3-month, downward. That was great.
I'll take 3 months.
Listen, I didn't even know what any of that stuff meant back then. I was like, I was out of it.
Right.
So I reported to prison in 2006, and at that point I was almost 4 years sober, and really found out that most guys, when they go to prison, they're like drinking and drugging right up to the door.
Right.
And I was like, at this point, a sober guy, and I had been through the steps, and I had been like, I'd already started my transformation, and I was going to be in prison, roughly a year, a little bit more. And I was able to turn it into this kind of transformative experience. And it was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. I mean, I wasn't in a camp. Mm-hmm. So I was in a low security prison with controlled movements and bars on the windows. But I'd met people there that I never would have had an opportunity to meet, gangbangers from Baltimore. And this is a prison out in Pennsylvania. But a lot of good things happened in prison that I look back on that were great, because it really got me in touch with myself and finished kind of the job of creating some humility in me. But I also found some spirituality in there that I didn't know I would have, and I got into shape. And so there's a whole prison story,
right,
which is not unlike most people's prison stories, as it turns out. But for me, it was profound. But when I got home from prison, first I was in a halfway house, and then I was on home confinement, and then I'm living, a very simple life at that point, and I start to volunteer.
So did Lynn, that's your wife's name, right?
Yeah.
Did she come and see you while you were in prison?
She came and saw me for 6 or 7 times.
Okay.
And then I got my Dear John letter from her. And I'm telling you, it was like, if you go out to the waiting room, if you go out to the visiting room, there's a sea of people, what they look like in a visiting room, right? And then there's this beautiful, stately woman who looks like she should be on the cover of Town and Country magazine or Vanity Fair. It's like she was completely out of place. Yeah. I mean, she's magnificent looking, and just the way she carries herself. And the first time she came to visit me, we embraced, and then we sat down, because you get that, because you're allowed like 30 seconds to hug, something like that.
Yeah, so ridiculous, right? So horrible.
Right. And so she sits down, and for the next 2 hours, she folded herself over in a like this fetal position and cried for 2 hours. We couldn't even talk. She just cried for 2 hours. And at the end of about 2 hours, she looked up at me, and the first words out of her mouth to me, other than, the initial hello, the first words out of her mouth, she looked at me and she said to me, "I hear everybody likes the cheeseburgers from the vending machines."
The biggie burgers or something, or big ass burger.
Oh, that's it. That's right.
They have like a.
Oh, that's right. Right. So, and we didn't even know that there's like a protocol. There's a protocol.
Yeah,
I mean, she knew to bring the change in the bag, but it's like, if you don't heat the burger the right way, or stick the chicken wings up the right way, and out of there,
and it's frozen in the middle,
you get yelled at, right? Like, people are like looking at you like you're crazy, and so she's heating up these cheeseburgers because they don't let the inmates anywhere near the vending machines or near the microwave. right? And she's sobbing, and we're sitting there like eating these cheeseburgers. And to me, it's the greatest thing in the world because I've been in at that point like 6 weeks, and she's trying to choke down the cheeseburger. But it wasn't right. But I had a lot of friends visit me from AA, and my kids visited me every month. And I had no idea how much everybody was suffering on the outside. I was oblivious to it. But when I did get out, I started to volunteer first at the rehab that I'd gone to. And then I started rehab volunteering at criminal justice organizations. And I was working with people who were in diversion programs, and I was working with people who might have otherwise gone to prison, but they had drug habits and things like that. And I was kind of like a volunteer house manager. And there were shakedowns, and there was all kinds of, and I was running groups. And I said, this is, I feel great. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. This is what I want to do. And the third organization I volunteered for, even then, they asked me to join their board of directors. So I'm a couple of years out of prison at that point, and they want someone like me on their board of directors. They want someone who has lived experience. And I joined the board of directors of Family Reentry, which is, at the time, was a large criminal justice organization in Connecticut out of Bridgeport. And I'm thinking, wow, I really have like a path here. So I went to the pastor who was at the church that Lynn and I were going to. And because I'm Jewish, we went to temple on Friday nights, and on Sunday mornings we went to church. And so we were kind of like really into this kind of AA, spirituality, religion thing. And I went to the pastor and I said, I don't know what to do with my life. I'm trying to figure it out. And he looked at me and he said to me, I think you should go to seminary. I think you should go to divinity school. And I said, what's that?
Right.
And he explained to me, it's where people go to learn about faith and they become ministers. You got to go to divinity school or you go to seminary.
Wasn't even something you were even thinking about? Like that just came out of left field?
Well, dude, first I'm Jewish.
Right.
Right. So I don't even really know what he's talking about. And I said, well, why would I want to do that? And he said, look, if you go to a progressive seminary or progressive divinity school, like Harvard or Yale or Union Seminary in Manhattan or one of those, it's basically about social justice. But it can continue kind of your trajectory of where you were from being a lawyer, and you can really do a lot of good for society. You're not just kind of like being buried in a halfway house kind of thing. And I said, all right, let me look into it. And I applied. And I did apply to Union Theological Seminary, which is up at Columbia University in Morningside Heights in Manhattan. And it was the first time anywhere outside of an AA meeting I had to actually write my story down. I had to tell them all about my felonies and what happened and my path and everything. And they accepted me. So in 2009, I started at Union Theological Seminary. And I went there full time for 3 years. And when I graduated, I got a master's of divinity and became a reverend. And in the meantime, Lynn and I got married.
Oh, okay. What happened? I thought you said you got the Dear John letter. You didn't say that.
Oh, no. No. So what happens when I got back from prison, we saw each other at AA meetings. And, there was this magnetic thing that pulled us back together. And so we did get married in 2009.
Okay.
And so I go through seminary and, we're practically penniless, and I'm a student at this point. And I hadn't been in school for 27 years, and I didn't even know how to read. It's like so much reading and so much stuff. And law school was easy compared to seminary, at least for me. But when I got out of seminary, I started working at this inner city church in Bridgeport, which is an all Black and Latino church.
That's perfect for you.
And it was perfect. It was friggin' perfect.
Fit in like yours.
Lynn and I were the only white people there.
Right.
But they were accepting. They were beautiful, beautiful people. And almost everything I learned about criminal justice was from, and it was right across the street from the nonprofit that I was on the board of directors of. So almost everything I learned about criminal justice, and I learned about the plight of the oppressed and what happens in these marginalized communities, and especially in communities where they have like an embodied relationship with the criminal justice system. It's like, you come from the suburbs, nobody goes to prison, but in these neighborhoods, like a lot of people go to prison. It's just part of the culture, unfortunately.
I was going to say, Colby's heard me say this over and over again. I'm like, look, if you're a middle-class white guy and you go to prison, everybody gives up on you. Nobody wants to help you.
That's
Nobody
right.
sends you money. Nobody comes to see you.
That's
Nobody.
right.
They're all embarrassed of you. They're ashamed. You should be ashamed. And they give up on you. I'm like, if you're a black guy, your baby mamas drag your kids up to the prison to see you. They send you money. Your mother comes to see you. Your father, like everybody you know, your cousins, everybody. You have you have more support in prison as a black guy than you do probably on the street.
That's right.
And it's amazing to sit here and think and see that happening. And you're like, I can't get somebody to send me, $50 so I can buy honey buns and some coffee.
Yeah.
And this guy's got tons of money on his books, and every visitation they're calling his name. He's got problems where it's like, man, I got a problem. On Tuesday, my one of my baby mamas comes and the other one wants to come, and I'd rather see her, but she's coming with my kids and I want to see my kids. And it's like I don't know what to do. I got to tell one of them, I got to come up with a story. I got to tell one of them. And I'm thinking, nobody's coming to see me. That's not a problem. Like, that's a problem you want to have.
It's brilliant. And what people don't know about being in prison is that it's really a community in there.
Oh, yeah.
And for those of us who for years were in isolation and we're looking over our shoulders and we're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, the first real, I had community because I had gone into AA, but there's a real community in prison, and you kind of learn how to live together in this community. So I'm learning now. I'm actually like a minister with. I became baptized while I was in seminary, so now I'm considering myself a Jew and a Christian. I consider myself a double belonger. I don't know if that's cool with anybody else, but it's cool with me. And I'm learning, these are people who have no resources. They have no money, and for example, I was on worship rotation, so every 4 or 5 weeks, I had to be up there and give a sermon. And so it's one Sunday where I'm giving a sermon, and Lynn comes, because Lynn's coming every Sunday with me. And she goes to this overpass that's not far from the church, where there are homeless people, under the overpass. And she says, and she said, "Look, do you guys want to come into the church?" And
what is happening,
bro? And I'm telling you, and it's she's like this little thing, and she's out there, and she's saying, "Do you want to come into church?" My husband is preaching this morning, and they don't want to come into the church, so she starts negotiating with them. She says to them, "What do you need?" And they're saying to her, "Well, we could use a jacket, we could use a blanket." And she said, "Come into the church, we'll get you blankets and jackets." So she brings these 20 people in who are following her in. And they're all sitting in the back row, and they're homeless people, right? Which is great, right? And she comes up to me and she said to me, "Listen, I got them in here, but we promised them."
Yeah. Did we do that?
Yeah. We promised them jackets and blankets. And I said, "Where are we getting that? This church has no money."
Right.
But we're living in Greenwich.
Right.
But I'm going up to Bridgeport every day to work. So we go to the rich churches in Greenwich, and we say, "Listen, will you donate some jackets and blankets to these people up in Bridgeport?" And of course they did. That's that's what people in rich churches do. Is we'll go cook a meal for you, or they want to do outreach.
Right.
So I'm living this life where I'm living in Greenwich, and I'm going to AA there, and all these captains of industry and lawyers and hedge funders and everything who are going to go to prison. Everyone says, go see Prison Jeff. That's my nickname. That's my nickname at AA,
Right.
Prison Jeff. Go see Prison Jeff. But I'm with all these very poor people in Bridgeport, and they're only like 20 minutes away from each other. And so I start blogging about it. And it was like early blogging. And I'm blogging about how crazy it is to like be living in like one of the richest towns in America and working in one of the poorest towns of America. And I'm blogging about how like in the morning, there's like 200 business people lined up on the train platform heading from Greenwich down to Manhattan to go to work. But on the other side of people going north, there's like me and a couple of maids and maybe some day workers going up to Bridgeport. There's like 6 of us on the platform. There's like 200 people on one side of the platform and like 6 of us on the other. And it's like fascinating to me. I'm blogging about it. So I get a phone call from this guy, and he tells me he's a reporter at a hedge fund magazine. I didn't even know there were hedge fund magazines.
All right.
And he said he's a reporter, and he asked me, he goes, "Are you the guy who's writing that blog? Are you the minister to hedge funders?"
I guess I didn't know that.
Right.
But
I said, "Well, I'm ministering here and I'm working with the hedge funders in AA, but I've never quite put those concepts together." And I talked to the guy and we arranged an interview, and I like run into the kitchen and I said to Lynn, I said, "I think our big idea has come. Like, this is incredible. Like, minister to hedge funders.
Right.
This is like a great idea." So we decide we're going to start what turns out to be the world's first ministry to support white-collar criminals and their families. And we don't know what it's going to be. We don't know if there's going to be anybody who's going to pay attention. We don't know anything, but we know we don't want anyone to go through what we went through. And we look online at that point. There's nothing we can find. And we start this ministry. And we go to one of the big churches in Greenwich and we say, "Listen, we need a home. Can you be can we be your outreach ministry here?" And they say yes. But what the pastor says to me, he said to me, "Look, but you need to prove to me that there's actually a market.
Right.
You know, are people going to actually sign up for this?" So he basically counsels me and he said to me, "I think you should take this thing on the road and find out if there's a market." So for the next 6 months, we hit conferences. We're doing sermons all over the East Coast. We're out there and we're getting this incredible response from people who are like basically hiding behind their blinds, who are afraid to go out in public. They've been kicked out of their clubs. They've been kicked out of their social communities. Their kids are being ostracized. And in this weird way, we're giving them a voice.
And why have they been? Because
they're all white-collar criminals.
White-collar criminals. Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah. And now they're starting to connect with us, and we start to build this
Community.
This
All right.
community around it. So in 2016, what happened was we decided to start this white-collar support group, but everyone spread out all over the country. And so at the time, it was the precursor to Zoom. I think it was GoToMeeting. And we said, we're going to start it online and see what happens, see if people will come on. And our first meeting, we had 4 people, but it was just like a Zoom meeting now.
Yeah.
There's 4 people on the screen. And it was like, as soon as we started talking, we realized like all of us had like the same story. All of us were going through the same things. And it started to build. And then like one magazine found out about it, and then another, and there started to be a lot of articles, and people started to find us. It's building steadily. At that point, it wasn't really self-sustaining, but I'm no longer working in the church, and I'm pretty much doing full-time at trying to build this ministry. When this nonprofit that I was on the board of directors is having some financial problem, there's a fiscal crisis in Connecticut, and they asked me if if I could step off the board and become their CEO. And I said, if you're going to ask a white collar criminal to be your CEO, you got to know what you're getting involved in. I mean, like the donors may have a problem with this, and the Department of Corrections might have a problem with this.
Are you? I was going to say, are you still on probation? You're not.
No,
on
no,
probation.
I'm off probation at this point. So they say, yeah, we want you to do it, and they hire me. And for 3 years, I become the CEO of this large criminal justice organization that has 100+ employees and is very well thought of in the criminal justice community. And it's crazy. Like, right now, it's not so crazy because there's a lot of people who kind of go into those positions now, not necessarily white collar, but people who've been to prison who are in those positions now. But this was like before the big movement where they would allow people with lived experience to take on senior roles in these criminal justice organizations. And there I am doing it. And I'm doing it for like 2.5 years. And we're still doing this ministry. And I realized that what people really need is they don't just need a minister. They just don't need spiritual support. What they really need is lawyers that they can trust, because the lawyers are you've worked with lawyers, right?
Yeah.
It's like they have no idea what we're going through. And I know from experience now with a lot of these lawyers that they're really not providing for their clients what the clients really need. Maybe they're representing them through sentence, but they have a very poor track record, most of them. And then these people they're just sent off to prison, and they come home and they don't know what to do. And the lawyers have not prepared them, and nobody has any information. So I decide, listen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put my application in to get reinstated to the law, which is not easy.
Right.
But I put my application in, and then COVID hits, and I got to kind of wind through that whole process, and it takes about 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, I find out I'm literally every day checking the docket at the appellate division in the Second Judicial Department. So that's in Brooklyn. And every day I'm checking online on my phone to see whether or not there's been a decision as to whether or not I got my law license back.
Right.
And I'm freaking out. It's like,
it's been forever.
It's been a long time. And it's like, I'm either going plan A or plan B, right? Plan A is I'm going to be a lawyer again.
Right.
Plan B is, I don't know what plan B is, because it's like, I got a ministry here, and I no longer the CEO of that company. I've like put most of my eggs in the lawyer basket. So I don't really know what plan B is going to be. And so it's this one morning now in May 5th of 2021. And I'm sitting kind of in a chair in the living room, and I open my phone, and the writing is really small.
Yeah. On the docket. Yeah,
on the docket. It's like I gotta like squint practically to see it. And I'm looking like every day just to find, people versus Jeffrey Grant. And it's people versus this, people versus that every single day for like months. And I open it and I say, like I think that's my name. So I open it, and that's my name, and I'm scared to death because now I got to read it.
Right.
And I click on it and I read it, and it's one page. It's just one page, and it's basically just one paragraph. And all it says is, and I'm just going to paraphrase. What it says is that as of that morning, so this is like at 4:00 in the afternoon on May 5th. So as of that morning, they had restored me to the roles of attorneys. So I'm already an attorney. I'm an attorney again. I've been readmitted to the bar. And I said, I can't believe it. So I hit print on the air printer, and I go to the printer and I get it out, and I walk into the kitchen, and it just so happens that my wife is on FaceTime with my stepdaughter. And I'm holding this piece of paper over my head, smiling. And my stepdaughter sees me walk into the kitchen over my wife's shoulders. And she sees me and she has a feeling that something good's about to happen, and she hits record.
Okay.
And I put it down in front of my wife, and my wife reads it, and she starts to cry and freak out. And then she starts to dance, like, dance around the kitchen. And the whole thing is recorded. And we're crying, and we can't believe it, because I'm like, I'm a lawyer again.
Right.
I don't have to do anything else. I'm already a lawyer. So we take a clip from it, and I send it out to maybe 20 of my best friends, just the clip.
Right.
And everybody knows what it means, like, right away. And with that, I shifted from being just the reverend who's running this support group to a lawyer who can then basically expand the ministry into things that people really need somebody to trust, and who their lawyers would give respect to. And I could really not just change their life spiritually or have them change my life, but also I could really help them in the trenches. And so that was about 3.5 years ago. Right after that, I got a phone call from a reporter because all of a sudden then there were articles about how, like, the white collar lawyer who got his law license back is now representing people doing white collar.
Right.
And I get a phone call from a reporter at the New Yorker magazine. And he said, we have a slot open for a fast track article. Do you guys want to be in the magazine?
Who said? Did people say no to that?
And I go, shit, yeah. Are you kidding? The New Yorker's like about as high as you can get.
Yeah.
Right. And he said, all right, so we're going to do all the interviews. We're going to do everything. And at the end of August, this article comes out in the New Yorker. And I'm telling you, you could divide my professional life up into before the New Yorker magazine and after the New Yorker magazine. Because as soon as that hit, it was like skyrockets. It was like everybody wanted to join the support group. Other people wanted to interview me. We were hearing from documentary companies in Hollywood. I can't even tell you what was going on. It was like, and we didn't know what to do. All of a sudden, we were like, we went from a relatively small support group to we were tripling in the amount of people who were signing up every week. And we went through some growing pains, but we're still doing the support group. And that this coming Monday night is I think our 426th weekly meeting. So we've been doing it for 8.5 years. And we have a white collar conference that we're hosting this fall, where we have brilliant people who are going to come together. We're doing it all online. And that whole thing is rolling out. The law firm is like rolling out, and like all of a sudden I'm like living my best life. I'm like living the life that you can't even dream of when you're locked up.
When you're laying in your bunk, staring at the ceiling.
It's like you got to be kidding. Like I'm lawyering, I'm helping people. I don't even consider any of it work, because it's like my passion. It's what I want to do. And I have this wacky story that was just basically putting one foot ahead of the other, showing up at an AA meeting every single day, and pretty much just doing God's work, and which led me to you, frankly. Right. and I got some other podcast opportunities and some very cool magazine articles and things, and some other podcasters who help spread the gospel. And anybody who gets in touch with me, I don't care if they can pay me or not. I mean, if you got an hour of my time, I'm going to, if you're in front of me for an hour, I'm going to help you figure it out or get a resource for you or whatever. And if they can pay, great. If they can't pay, I don't care. This is not about the money anymore, It
doesn't sound sustainable.
No.
But,
well, the people who can pay me are paying me pretty well.
Okay.
But it's like this fantastic life. Right. And how did that happen? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. It's like, as you probably know, like on any given morning, you know, I could wake up and be overwhelmed and not want to get out from under the covers and be in a fetal position, like this is all too much, or like, and still have really bad days, and on other days I'm living this incredible life that's way beyond my wildest dreams. And so I guess that's why I was really happy to get hooked up with you, to be able to bring this message out there that there is hope. You know?
Yeah. No, I'm glad you made the drive after your flight got canceled. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you coming. I mean, how do you feel? You feel good about this?
I feel great about this.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you one of the things. It's that sitting opposite someone who I don't have to like go back to square one and explain everything to, that I know that you know what I'm talking about, is important. It's critical. And I know who your reach is. You know, I know the good work you're doing and how you're trying to get yourself out there and improve things for people. So that was important to me. You know, I really had to check you out the right way.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I've had 2 or 3 people in the last, like probably every month, I at least have 2 or 3 people that somebody's texted me, or, well, they start with like an email or something, like, you know, and it's like, I got a Target letter, you know, like, and it's like, you know, how bad is this? I'm like, well, I don't know. What did you do? You know, and they're like, well, can I talk to you? I got to ask somebody something. And, you know, typically what I do is I hear them out. Okay. It's not that bad. You know, you've got the guys that call you up and they're in the truck and they're ready to kill themselves. And it's like, okay, bro, you know, listen, you know, you're looking at a couple $100,000 fraud. This is not the end of the world. Yeah. You think it is, but it's not. Yeah. Did you make it through high school? Yeah, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, this is an opportunity that you can take this opportunity to kind of rebuild your life and reset your life, and it's not that bad. And then, you know, you kind of talk to them, and then I usually direct them to like the public defender, because they don't have resources at this point.
It depends who it is.
Right. And, but yeah, I've had multiple guys. And then I have the guys that I actually have a guy right now that, listen, he texts me every week or two. They haven't called me back. What's going on? I'm like, listen, let me explain something. He's like, I'm ready to plead guilty. I'm like, I want to go to jail. I want to get this over with. I go, right. He's like, so I don't understand what's taking so long. I'm like, that's the problem. You've heard the term, the wheels of justice move slowly. I'm like, he's like, well, what do you mean? Look, even when they call you back, even when you plead guilty, even if you try and rush everybody, I said, you're not going to be in prison for 6 months to a year. And at 6 months, I'd be shocked it happens that quick. Oh, yeah. You know, I'm saying, they're like, he's like, I have to deal with this for the next 6 months to a year. I'm like, yeah, go get a job, start working, don't plan long-term, you know, and based on his thing, he's probably going to do a year, maybe 2 years in prison. And I'm like, not the end of the world. Start putting some money aside, where do I, you know, my apartment, go rent a spare room. Like, look, you know, I have that kind of, like, you might as well take a step back from the life you're living right now.
Yeah, good for you.
Start selling your stuff off, put a little bit of money, you know, in the bank. Like, don't get, you know, like, you have to understand you're going to start over, but look at it as a challenge. You know, I'm going to start over from square one. And am I the person that's going to be able to survive this? Like, obviously you are. Yeah. You're a smart individual. You've done this, you've done this, you've done this. You can start over from ground zero, you know, or from, you know, zero all the way up. You can start over in someone's spare room. I did it. Yeah. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I got a degree in fine arts, bro. Like, I'm prepared to do nothing. That degree prepared me to basically commit fraud. Like I can make fake documents like that. There's no market for that unless you're committing fraud. So. Yeah, so I explained, you know, these are guys with master's degrees, and, you know, they have degrees in finance, and they're, I'll never be able to, like, stop. That's not true. That's you being negative. You can work
we
through
are
that.
Our worst enemies, you know. Whatever's going on in our head, boy.
Who is it? I wish I could remember who said this. It was you suffer, I forget what it was, like, you suffer more in your own mind than you ever will in reality.
That's the truth.
You cause yourself more agony and anguish in your mind than the reality of it. And, you know, he's like, well, what do I do? I'm like, well, you go get 2 jobs. Go get a job and then a part-time job. You bust your ass. Like, he's like, well, what kind of job am I going to get? You know, and they always, you know, I was in the newspaper, I was this, or I'm under this. I'm like, right, then you go work at McDonald's. Oh, McDonald's. Oh, now you're too good for McDonald's. Listen, you're going to be in prison soon. So cut that shit out.
That's right.
You know, go work at McDonald's. You know, how great would it be to be able to say, I started at McDonald's and now I'm doing this.
That's right.
That's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
But the problem is you do have to work at McDonald's for a little bit to say it. You know, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
So
I've learned there's nothing beneath me.
yeah, that's
nothing. I cleaned out trash cans in prison, and even when I got home, you know, when I was volunteering at those rehabs, I was cleaning up vomit. You know, that's what I was doing.
I remember, this is funny because I'm gonna cry. But listen, I remember because of writing stories in prison. I got out of prison, went to Walmart, spent $300 out of the $400 I had that was given to me by another inmate.
Wow.
So it gave me $400. I spent $300 buying new clothes. And then I had been a part of an option for a story I had written.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd optioned it once, and I got a check, but that money's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I happened to be in the halfway house. I'd been there a couple of weeks, and they optioned it again.
Really?
And I got another check. My ex-wife called me. She's like, "You got a letter here from some lawyer?" I'm like, "From what?" And she told me the name of the lawyer, and I was like, "Oh, open the letter." And she opens the letter. She says, "Oh my God!" And I go, "What?" She goes, "The fucking check for whatever it was, like 6,000 or something, or 7,000." And I went, I think it was like 6 something. And I go, "Oh my God." She goes, "I can't believe this." And I said, "Oh my God." I said, I'm coming to get the letter. I got to get the letter, you know? And I think she gave it to my sister or something. Anyway, I got the letter, or get the check. I buy a car for $2,500.
Yeah.
I buy a year's worth of full coverage insurance. I get some new tires. The money's gone. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's already gone. And so anyway, I actually, at one point, I used to go see my mom. You know, I would go see my mom. At one point, my ex-wife was there. And she had dropped her car. Somebody dropped her off, whatever the case may be. She had to go get her car. And I said to her, she said, "Can you give me a ride up to drop my car off?" You know, and she's combative sometimes, you know, so it's more like an order. And I'm like, "Yeah, of course. So, you know, pick her up, get in the car." And we're driving my little Jeep, right? And it's not like a cool Jeep. It's a chick Jeep. It's like a Jeep Liberty, right? It's like a 15-year-old Jeep Liberty.
That's awesome.
That, you know, that's horrific, you know? And I'm driving it, and it's Florida. And she starts messing with the AC, and she's like, "What's with the AC?" And "What's with the AC?" I said, are you hot? And she goes, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, hold on." And I roll the window down, and she goes, "Your AC doesn't work?" I said, "No, that's for rich people." I said, "It's not how this. You don't know kind of what's happening." And she goes, "Oh my God!" And then she goes, "What's wrong? What's wrong with the radio? Like, the radio won't work." I said, "Is it on?" She said, "It's on." And I went, "Oh." I said, "Hold on." And I hit the dash a couple times, and it pops on. Because it had a short, like if you went over, you know, speed bump, boom, it would go out. So you had to hit the dash a couple times, and it comes on. I'm like, "Hey, we're good." And she goes, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's kind of cool. I'm like Fonzie." And she looked at me and she goes, "You have fallen so far."
Oh, yeah.
And I said, "I know, right?" I said, "But it's great.
Oh, yeah.
It's great."
Isn't that weird?
And she just shook her head like, "I can't believe this." Because, you know, she knew me. You know, she knew me when, like, I never got my oil changed because I'm changing cars so quickly.
Yeah.
Or you have one of the guys go get the oil change, or you're just not living a normal life. You know, it's like, no, you know, we're flying first class. And I mean, I can't fly with the peasants.
Yeah.
Are you serious? What? Spirit? Are you serious? But yeah, that was hilarious, where she was just like, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
So, especially from her, who had seen me, you know, be a maniac. But it was great. I'd never felt better in my life, you know.
Yeah,
I felt better than I feel now, you know.
Oh, yeah,
like,
of course. So all of a sudden you have something to lose again.
Yeah.
It's like a weird thing, right?
Yeah, it's funny because I always joke, like, I wouldn't care about going to prison right now. My problem with going to prison right now is that if you went to prison right now, I could only sustain what I have for a few months.
Yeah,
so you'd be coming out of prison in 6 months, and you'd be starting over from zero. So I might as well go for 5 years. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not the prison experience, which was terrifying before. It was losing everything, and now I do. Now I have a whole bunch to lose, and so yeah, it does. It slowly goes away, which is kind of a horrible thing in a way.
Yeah, well, and some of it's a trauma reaction too. You know, we don't really know how traumatized we are and how beat up we are, and that gratitude we have just for like little things, and just to be able to, just to be able to breathe, or just to be able to have a meal, and I take a lot for granted again now. It's, it's stunning sometimes. Just I could forget. I'm home from prison 17 years.
Right.
So it's like it could be a distant memory for me, but because of all these guys I work with, that keeps it green. It keeps it fresh.
Yeah.
But hey, this is great.
Yeah, I was thinking this morning, my wife and I were walking, and there was fog that was kind of coming in at a distance, and we're walking around this, we live in a nice little,
pretty, yeah.
We're walking around this pond. There's all these ponds and stuff. They have alligators in them and stuff. And we're walking around, and the fog is coming in. There's these houses and everything, and the trees are in the distance. So part of the trees are kind of behind the fog. You can see them. I said, that looks great, doesn't it? The way the fog's like that. And I said, man, that's awesome. I said, looks so good. Something I would have never, ever realized before or at all. And she just looked at me. She kind of smiled, and she was like, and I said, are you making fun of me? She says, no, I like it when you notice those little things,
So that's the stop and smell the roses is real. Yeah, absolutely.
And then these alligators came after us. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah. Florida. Well, listen, I really appreciate you making the drive.
Yeah, I hope this is helpful for somebody. That's the goal, right?
Where would you want people to go? I mean, we'll put whatever links you want. We'll put it in the description box.
Yeah.
But where do you want people to go? And
well, at this point, there's probably 3. I mean, to reach me as a lawyer, it's grantlaw.com.
Okay.
And the ministry and the support group are prisonist.org. But now, because we have a conference coming up, we actually own whitecollarconference.com. That's an easy one to remember, whitecollarconference.com. And we're so looking forward to this conference, and because just to bring the gathering of the tribe and to be able to treat ourselves with respect and dignity, and demand that other people do too. So we're doing everything right. We had it branded properly, and we hired the right people, and we're really doing it the right way, because no one's ever done this before. There's never been a conference by people who are white-collar justice impacted for people who are white-collar justice impacted. Lots of conferences from lawyers and fraud examiners, but never one by us and for us. So, we're doing it with respect.
Hey, you guys, I appreciate you guys watching. If you liked the interview, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos like this. Please share the video to anybody that you think could be impacted by it. Also, we're going to leave Jeff's links for the websites in the description box. So you just go into the description. If you can't, remember, you just go in the description box, click the link, boom, it'll shoot you right there. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you. And also, please consider joining our Patreon. It's like $10 a month. We put Patreon exclusive material on there. Really does help Colby and I make these videos. Thank you guys so much. See ya.